I first thank the organisers of the IACD for inviting me to present at this 2021 World Conference. And a special thanks to the organisers and my colleague and friend, Dr. Daniel Muir, the conference chair. I have called this presentation Reframing Community Development and Resilience. And I will begin firstly by providing a context to this by outlining some of the challenges that we face as community development workers who work with urban and rural communities in countries around the world. These are, firstly, the impacts of the global COVID pandemic and its terrible destruction of communities around the world, and the existing severe inequalities that it has exposed locally, nationally, regionally, and globally. Secondly, the continuing climate emergency that demonstrates we cannot allow global corporations and some nation states to continue to plunder planet Earth's natural resources and create irreversible environmental damage, particularly in poorer communities. We have a neoliberal capitalist economic order that is more concerned with seeking more and more profit, power, and greed rather than responding to human need. We have right-wing nationalist, often populist governments, corrupt regimes and their allies with military support that ensures they continue to hold power and control, and in doing so, silences democratic voices and any forms of criticism. We have a post-colonial and new colonialism in developing countries that exploits people, their land, and their natural resources. We have existing forms of political representation that do not bring about real structural social change, power, nor empowerment for communities. We see the increasing rise of the super rich, multi-billionaires who fly around the world in their private jets, who hold sway with governments in their pursuit of expanding their wealth and power and influence to the detriment of communities. Urbanization. The population moved to urban settings away from rural areas. Estimated that by 2050, over 70% of Earth's population will be urban dwellers. And with this, it brings a global phenomena with its significant socio-spatial segregation and inequality between the rich and the rest of us. We have global corporations who view ordinary people, families, and communities as collateral damage in their pursuit of financial rewards for their shareholders and CEOs. We have regional conflicts that create community disorder, displacement, and refugees. Now, given these challenges, and indeed many others, and their impact on the communities we engage with, how should we, as community development workers, people working with communities, respond in helping to support community resilience? However, first, let's unpack what community resilience is and what might be seen as the traditional community development role. This is maybe the role to enable communities to withstand adverse socio-economic conditions they face, or natural disaster, famines or conflicts, or acts of terrorism. Is it to help and support communities who have the strength and ability to identify and develop their existing resources and assets and create new ones? Do we aim to build community networks and community and social capital? Is it to help build community organizations and groups and capacity building? Do we look to support mental health, welfare, and other health and well-being initiatives? To work with community leaders, faith groups, and other key community stakeholders? Are we working to give communities a voice and to empower them? All of these and perhaps many more. However, there is a question we need to perhaps ask ourselves. Does our intervention and working with communities to help build and support this community resilience actually achieve real change? Should we also see our role to help communities to begin to understand what is going on around them? By this, what I mean is the political, social, economic, and material circumstances, the context they find themselves in. Is it somehow natural, the way it is and has always been, that some communities continually face poverty and hunger, that having a roof over your head is denied, that living in fear is part of daily life, that your community around you is changing without you having a voice, and you have no political representation? So I ask this question, what is to be done? I would argue that it is reframing community resilience by moving from adaptation to confrontation as a way forward. Communities are continually seen as needing to adapt and change to meet the challenges they face. Whatever they may be and wherever in the world, in short, to become more resilient. Somehow by building community strengths in all its forms, we help their survival, learn the lessons, further their development, and if possible, avoid similar challenges in the future. However, have we asked ourselves why it is that the majority of community development activities we undertake appear to be alongside the communities of the poor, the dispossessed, the excluded, people from the wrong social class, tribe, or religious group, the illiterate, the disenfranchised, and others in a similar position? And is there a recognition that community development workers with this adaptation model of what community resilience is may, by their actions, actually support the status quo, help silence critical voices and dissent, and adhere to the policies and politics of the NGO or government department who they are employed by and who are paying their salaries, their wages? Do we continue to support the neoliberal capitalist agenda and its social and economic structures that exploits the poor, their communities, and the powerless? Maybe we need to accept that if there is continuing failure of neoliberalism for the many, then we can begin to address this and offer ways forward, alternatives. Perhaps a leftist and progressive reassessment, an ideological shift and community development praxis embedded in a rejection of neoliberalism, and one that is anti-capitalist, is required in working with communities and help develop a critical resilience. Based on the values of solidarity and cooperation, one that is centered on the well-being of people and their communities, one that meets human needs rather than make profits and promotes participation in the political processes for social changes in order to encourage the redistribution of power, social justice, and social inequality. One that aims to build social capital and capacity for empowering communities toward just and fair societies. A community development role that challenges the current methods, theories, and approaches that currently exist in working with communities. That, for example, creates pathways for building wider alliances and coalitions. For example, social movements such as Black Lives Matter, Extinction Rebellion, and other forms of new political representation that seek political left of centre and progressive democratic representation and change at local and national levels. A practice that has a political analysis of these local and national processes, the structural economic conditions and political interests that continually create, recreate, and perpetuate the social injustice, discrimination, and massive inequalities these communities continually face. If communities are struggling with, for example, the lack of basic housing, grinding poverty, limited or no educational opportunities, poor health, are they supposed to rectify these challenges themselves, or do we help and support them in doing so by helping to build resilience? If so, then we need to look at the political, socioeconomic, and structural determinants communities are facing. A position that in working with communities, we cannot and should not remain neutral, that taking sides is now perhaps a fundamental requirement of our role in and supporting them in taking action to change their material circumstances. I would argue that people working in the communities should rid themselves of the cloak of neutrality and at times the straitjacket of so-called professionalism by taking sides with communities and help bring about real social change, tackle social injustice, readdress inequality and discrimination, and challenge power. So to finish, as community development workers, a question to pose in the context of the impacts of this neoliberalism around the world, with its abject domination, exploitation, and pursuit of profit that are anathema to the communities we engage with. The next time you are working with a community, ask yourself, whose side are you on? Asante. Thank you.